Loïs,
Oui.
est-ce que tu peux nommer admin? J'ai été cliqué.
euh,
Loïs,
Oui.
est-ce que tu peux nommer admin? J'ai été cliqué.
J'ai l'impression qu'on ne m'entendait pas. Est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Oui.
Bon. Vous ne m'entendiez pas avant?
Non, moi, je n'entendais pas.
Avant. Je reprends. Avant d'entamer cette deuxième session, je voudrais
Now, before starting the second session, I would like to underline the involvement of UNESCO in this program. Thanks to Mr. Firmin Matoko's commitment, the Assistant Director General, Sector of Priority Africa and External Relations of UNESCO. And this support now starting the second session, I'd like to underline the African continent and would like to thank him for UNESCO in the financial program. Thanks to Mr. presentations and discussions, commitment, the Assistant Director General, Sector of Priority Africa and External Relations of UNESCO, desire expressed by the head of the Africa starting the second session, I'd like to ask for underline the involvement would like to thank him for UNESCO in the financial program. Thanks to Mr. presentations and discussions, having standards made the Assistant Director General, Sector of Priority Africa and External Relations of UNESCO, desire expressed support now head of the Africa starting the second session, I'd like to ask for underline the involvement would like to thank him for UNESCO in the financial program. Thanks to Mr. presentations and discussions, standards made the Assistant Director Sector of Priority Africa and External Relations of UNESCO, desire expressed support now head of the Africa starting the second session, I'd like to ask for underline the involvement would like to thank him for UNESCO in the financial program. Thanks to Mr. presentations and discussions, standards made the Assistant Sector of Priority Africa and External Relations of UNESCO, desire expressed support now head of the Africa starting the second session, I'd like to ask for underline the involvement would like to thank him for UNESCO in the financial program. Thanks to Mr. presentations and discussions, standards made the Sector of Priority Africa and External Relations of UNESCO, desire expressed support now head of the Africa starting the second session, I'd like to ask for underline the involvement would like to thank him for UNESCO in the financial program. Thanks to Mr. presentations and discussions, standards made. We had some people who told us that AWALE is not just a game, but a culture, that it was about mathematics, and that there is a history underlying it, and that there were also a fight to maintain a culture in Brazil, for instance. So we've seen that this practice has different aspects, and we listen to each other, AWALE as a game, but also AWALE as something serious. And there is another question that was asked, and I'll throw it out to the first panel at the end of their discussions. AWALE came from the earth, pottery, it became an artifact, a precious object, and now it's actually becoming virtual. And we thought about AWALE 2.0, AWALE from seeds to pixels. So we have some of the people who intervened yesterday. One, Ngufo Ganimas, who came back, and Serge Mbarga, who is hiding a little bit from us, but we played cat and mouse, but he's here. We also have Teddy Kosoko. I don't know if he tested his equipment, but he's here. And we also have Xavier Blanvillain, who is with us with good news. Mr. André Delphic, a player, a great professional of AWALE, but is also a mathematician. Well, he's not available for reasons beyond his control. He won't be with us. So we have the 4 members of the round table. So let's start with the introductions. Serge Mbarga, Teddy Kosoko, André Xavier Blanvillain, and then we will end with Ngufo because we heard him already yesterday. So let's start with Serge Mbarga. Could you please introduce yourself and speak about AWALE? Good afternoon to all of you. It's a great pleasure to be among you all today. I'd like to thank Présence Africaine for the invitation, the director, and also Mr. Martial Z. Mbelinga. I am Serge Mbarga Awona. There are players and there are others. Well, I am both. I play the Cameroonian version of AWALE Songo, and it's my grandfather. He was called Kuli Buvigu, and it means toys. And he's the one who initiated me, my grandfather, and I played as a child. And you know that the idea you have in your mind is, when am I going to beat my father through the game? I am a mathematician. I was trained in Lille in France, and I stayed there. And when I became a mathematician and a player, and knowing African strategic games, I wondered whether it was possible to mix mathematics with games, with what is recreational. So I started thinking about Songo and AWALE that I discovered in Lille in a shop called Caribou Africa. And my first reaction was to say, well, it's easy. You have fewer seeds than in Songo, but I was beaten several times. So I had to learn about this game, and I'm discovering a fascinating world. And I've started working on AWALE also. I published a few books on Songo and AWALE, and I'd like to say thank you for this beautiful initiative. Thank you, Serge. I'd like to say that apart from books, he has also developed a tutorial on this Songo game and on AWALE game also. Thank you. Now up to Teddy. Teddy, he's actually highly valuable to us because he is the representative of the Four Rows Board. Well, in the Sahel region, you have the two row board, and you have the Bantu Central African board with 4 rows. He is a young entrepreneur player. He is really passionate about the digital world. So he will tell us about his position. Now, good afternoon to all of you. It's a real pleasure for me to take part in this symposium and see all people from different areas discussing this game. My name is Teddy Kosoko from Central Africa, and I'm a founder of the Maseka game in France with African Universe in order to promote Africa and to also try to give impetus to the industries of games and culture. Now, the game is called Kisoro. You have 16 pits, and I never played it because there is a kind of superstition. They say that if you touch it, you will lose money, you will be out of job. And my parents forbade me to touch it. And when I went to France, came to France, and I studied computer science, I wanted to rediscover the African continent. And I realized that there were many people using this game in the Western world, and that this game provided a lot of knowledge. So I decided to use the Kisoro game from my country to share this knowledge with other people. So I learned to play Kisoro in France. Once in France, I discovered it, and I digitalized it, and I built a history over it, and also using mathematics. Some people mentioned that. And this game was officially released at the end of my studies, and it was successful because we realized that many people in Africa and from diaspora feel like discovering this knowledge, these African histories through the games, the mathematical aspects of this game. Then we had the possibility to do some work with students using the game and music, starting from games and spreading this universe, and to do a lot of activities around it. So it's really a pleasure for me to be here and discuss all of this. Thank you very much. Teddy, thank you for being with us. Now, we have Xavier Blanc-Villain. He has actually a reputation. I read on several places that he is the best French AWALE player. So could you please tell us about your contact with AWALE before we move on to the digitalization of this game? Good afternoon. No sound? No sound. I cannot hear Xavier. And the screen is frozen. Is it the case for everybody? Yes, we can't hear him. Yes, the screen is frozen. So maybe we will get back to him later on. Let's then hear Ngufo. Normally we should hear him. Maybe he's going to tell us more about the digitalized AWALE. Is Ngufo here? Yes. Yes, I'm here. Good afternoon, Martial. Good morning. Good afternoon to everybody. My name is Ngufo Nyaminaz. I'm an engineer by training, and I set up 5 years ago an association to promote African strategy games for personal and group development. Now, we know that in the 21st century, digital technology is unavoidable. So we developed those tools. And because you require technical skills, we do have engineers helping us to develop algorithms, working on AI, and we also work in partnership with French engineer colleges on different projects which are actually strategic for the development of African games, more particularly AWALE. Now, could you please tell me what is the state of development in this digitalization in practice? That's the first question. Now, the second question is, what are the advantages and the drawbacks? Do we lose something and win something by digitalizing? Teddy said when he was in Central Africa, he was told not to play the game because it will actually bring bad luck. So what are the different forms of digitalization of the games? Either we start with Gufo or Serge, as you like. No, well, seniority, I'll give the floor to Serge. Serge Barga, you have the floor. Thank you, Ngufo. So what is the stage we've reached in digitalization now? After living for a number of years in France, I live in Cameroon, and there is actually a leap. And in Africa today, we have some young people developing mobile apps of AWALE. There is an association gathered in Cameroon which did just that. And you know that mobile is the most developed in mass technology. Now, 20 years ago, when we actually placed an applet on internet, we were pleased with ourselves. Now, all the young engineers on the panel are saying, well, AWALE is now among the best from the technological point of view. Now, we have to add to the game layer another layer where AWALE will reach the world of video games. In video games, you can find an AWALE game because, for instance, this is what you should do, a problem to solve before reaching a higher level. So I think that we've reached high levels in digitalizing the game. Now, for the dissemination, extension phase, there is a requirement. It's the electronic board. Now, of course, the wooden board is like a book. It's beautiful. It's very good. But yesterday, I heard different speakers who spoke about the championship, extension during championship. Now, the aim is to bring those who are observing to become players. In Cameroon, when you watch people playing, you have to be highly concentrated. You have to have already a certain practice of the game to understand the moves. Somebody created in Cameroon the song of folk, and it was just displaying the board on a wall. So when they play on the board, you can actually display on a wall the game. Teddy mentioned it. There are others. Of course, you need to have the different moves, but how many pits people build and so on. So this is what I wanted to say. Thank you, Serge.
So now we've gone from
the internet to the applications, and for players like you, applications can actually go quite a bit further. It enables you to analyze gaming strategies, for example, and it can be integrated in video games, which takes us back to Teddy. Teddy has, in fact, developed this sort of thing. So what can you say about this? Well, on the subject of video games, in the digital world, when I started working with AWALE, the AWALE project that I've been working on, it was on a version which was available on mobile platforms, which was called Mancala, which got downloaded a lot because I'd been paying a lot of attention to comments and I could see that it was very popular, very appreciated. So when we decided to create Kisoro, we wanted to basically import a simple African game with its ecosystem on in the mobile world. And as Serge was saying, we decided to build a story and put it on top of the game. So there's two kingdoms fighting about this, about everything basically, except the only thing they have in common, which is the game. And then there's a character who says, well, since this is the only way we have of communicating, the only thing we have in common, perhaps we should try to work through this board and this game. And the character is going to encounter several players and beat different characters, and you or your avatar is going to beat several characters in the game. So the potential of the digital system is that you can connect with more people. In about 2 months, we had about 10,000 players in France, Russia, China, Japan, and in North Africa. So it was very quick, and we got in touch with a lot of people, which you can't do with the physical version of the game, simply because it's something you have to buy, you have to get, and all that. So if you, now that we talk about intangible games, well, there aren't that many out there today. Look at Play Store. There's only 5 or 6 versions of AWALE available online, whereas if you try chess, for example, there'll be 1 million out there. We've been asked, but it's quite costly and we haven't done it yet, to enable a development of different versions per country, so that you can get Sangor, so that you can get the local version for Madagascar, because these versions are not currently available digitally, which is a problem because it's, 2021. Surely all the different versions of the game should be available out there. So much remains to be done just to have the different versions of AWALE available online. Right, thank you. Well, I see that it's not just 2 generations we have out there, right? There's the older brother who's been there since the beginning and who thinks that things have really made a lot of progress. But then there's the younger brother who thinks that, I mean, really, it's maybe not exactly the Stone Age, but surely we are still very far back from where we want to be. Well, this is very interesting because it enables us to understand how far Africa has got and has yet to go with a game which is, and the game represents our cultural universe, really. And everything that you do, both of you, has a sort of cultural aspect, like a cultural identity aspect. Well, speaking of where we're standing and how far we've got, there's many beautiful things out there. There's a lot of initiatives out there, a lot of applications available, a lot of software, some of which are free. Anyone who is online can actually go out there and play AWALE, and it's easy. That being said, something's missing, something that we miss, which is different layers that express the huge developments of the game, how rich this game is, also possibilities of meeting people out there. For example, during competitions, which we have seen in Kazakhstan, for example, or Turkey, often the organizers have to recruit a whole team of umpires to keep an eye on the about 100 players. Now, with
AI, you would need that, or at least the umpires would have some help. You can call it AAI, which is AWALE AI. With that, you can improve the practice of the game. If you have lots of applications available backstage at such competitions, the promoters can use them to create some buzz around the game. We also need indicators for key performance indicators so that you can analyze the strategies and see if you are on the right path with regards to the deployment of your strategy. And sometimes you can create ghost profiles, which is something that's possible with AI. You can replicate the playing style of certain people. So the AWALE player can practice against the ghost of some really famous AWALE player. So gradually you can get better. And using the network of KPIs, you can see how far you've got. So there's a lot of things that could be done to develop and improve the system that we already have out there. Okay, well, thank you very much, Ngufo. I see that there are basically two paths we can go in dematerializing AWALE. One of the paths is about taking this as a game, the performance and explanation of the game itself, but there's another path that could bring AWALE into something more broad, culturally speaking, into gaming industries, for example. And maybe there are other paths as well. After all, there's video games, but we could also integrate AWALE into other worlds, into other digital worlds. If we go back to African mythologies, for example, to save lives. Two kings could be playing AWALE, and the winner, the one with the most seeds, can win. A lot of mythologies go in that direction. Now, I wanted to ask Xavier Blanc-Villain, where is he? Can he be heard? Can he be seen? Oh, I'm here. Oh, well, we are very welcome, Xavier. So here's what we can do. We're going to bring up a question which I know you really care about, and you're going to tell us what you think. The question of solving AWALE. Now, I've heard it said, I don't know anything about it, but I've heard it said that actually computers can play and be better than people than you, for example, at AWALE. Better even also than Serge Mbarga or Ngufo. You know that all of the best players could be beaten by computers. Well, is that true? And what's really at stake in that discussion? Oh dear. We appear to have lost Xavier again. What's the verdict from the technicians? Well, while we wait for Xavier Blanc-Villain to return, let's take up this question of solving AWALE. You IT people who are big fans of the game, would you be willing to impoverish the game by saying, oh yes, computers can control strategies, there's no point in playing, you can't play better than they can? What have you got to say to that subject? We start whenever you're ready. Serge, you have the floor.
Merci. Ça, c'est une problématique très intéressante.
Now that is a truly interesting issue, and it's a very stimulating one. Lots of people have ideas about that. Does the computer solve the game? Let me take the problem from another aspect. In AWALE, in African strategy games in general, there is Bidua. Bidua has to do with time and with circulating the seeds on the board. In all these games, what's really at stake is to figure out how free you are to move your seeds without having them taken from you. Now, the computer, it's good at calculating, and more more powerful the machine, the more effective it's going to be. So it's going to be difficult for us to play against them. But so far, AWALE does have billions of combinations. So there's two approaches. There's the human approach, in which the human can say, I understand about Bidua, and Bidua is a logic which is based on an equation and which depends on the position of the seeds and the position of the pits. And so if you enter this logic into a machine, the computer is going to anticipate. But does the computer have the ability to find the solution of the game? If the computer finds the solution of the game, well then, as Ngufo was saying, there's the mirror mechanism. People, humans, will be able to check the depth of the computer, to check how the computer thinks. And then the person can select a different logic using a shield. If the computer has a sword, if the computer is stronger, the person can still be looking for flaws in the logic of the computer. So there are different layers. Ngufo, what do you say? I get worried here. You know, computers are all very nice, but it seems to me that that really makes the game a lot less fun. What do you think? Microphone? Oh, yes, my microphone. Well, of course, it's true that the issue of the question of whether the game can be solved is a big discussion in the world of AWALE. Can AWALE be solved? Is it solved? And it's true that it sort of discredits the game. Once you have a solution, you feel like all the games have already been played. But remember, all strategy games in the world have been through that. It's happened to chess. Kasparov was beaten by a computer. Was it already 20 or 30 years ago? With Go, it happened very recently with AlphaGo. So computers, yes, they do beat all the biggest players at all the biggest strategy games, and yet those games retain their prestige. So I don't think it's a problem if that happens to AWALE as well. And in fact, we haven't had it demonstrated that AWALE has been beaten, because there are people who claim to have solved it, but it hasn't actually been assessed collectively. We will be looking at a solution in the near future, but so far, no university has presented something sufficiently rigorous and peer-reviewed and checked by all the stakeholders of AWALE. What I can add to that, and I'd like to reassure the public by saying that you can, even if you do find a solution to AWALE, there will still be strategic universes that ordinary people don't yet control or understand. And so you will be able to use the computer to improve your own playing. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. So I wouldn't really let that keep me up at night. So for you, if the game becomes intangible and everything that can happen to the game right now is a good thing. I don't think that there's much risk. The dematerialization of the game can create platforms that make it possible to go ahead and play mechanically and just be pleased that you won. On a lot of platforms, there's not much going on other than playing. You don't talk to people, you don't communicate. And that could happen with platforms. And that's really a lot of the warmth of the game lost then. But it's up to us to make sure that the game as a whole, including all the warmth and all the asides, is included on the platform, which is why I really appreciate what Teddy's done, because it's not just an algorithm producing calculations mechanically, but there's a story, a universe, interactions, people, and it's up to us, the promoters of the game, to be vigilant and make sure that as the game gets dematerialized, it does not get impoverished, and everything that belongs to AWALE is brought into the digital universe. Thank you very much, Ngufo. Now you're trying to retain both, right? The culture and the IT calculations strength. Now, let us stay together just for another minute. Would you play through the night, for example, with your game? Do you play at 8 o'clock at night? I don't actually play very much. I don't spend a lot of time playing the games. I spend a lot more time creating them than playing them. Oh, well, that's good. That's very healthy. So it doesn't pose a problem then. No, the version that we created, as Ngufo was saying, was created with everything that's supposed to be part of it. We made sure that it had all the warmth, all the breadth. We created the distance gaming, so I can play, say, from Toulouse with somebody who's back in Cameroon over the internet. That's good. That enables us to keep a bond through the game with the continent. And that's really appreciated very much by users. A lot of people have used our version of the game with that in mind. And I think that it's important to remember that when you use AI, well, we created a version of modified Mealmax using artificial intelligence to calculate at the beginning all the possible moves. The computer goes all the way into the depth, saying, if you do this, then you can do that, and I can do this, and you can do that. And we find that it finds 70% of what's possible. And we then added, right from the get-go, we lowered the intelligence of the robot. And that gives the player a chance to adapt. And the better you get, the more intelligence you are faced with. And we found that people appreciated the fact that it got more and more difficult because it was keeping up with their own understanding of the game as a whole. People say, oh, this seems easy. Oh, no, it's getting more complicated. Oh, no, it's more and more complicated. And they discover new aspects and new mechanisms, new ways of calculating. In fact, we found a person who was able to beat what we thought was unbeatable in the game, and we called that person and said, what did you do? And that person explained to us what they did. Putting a robot and putting the robot against the human, it teaches us a lot about what humans can do. Thank you very much, Teddy. Let me tell you why I asked you the question. I asked you that question because there are many traditions where AWALE is not played by day. It's not played in the daytime. Oh, sorry. No, you can't play it in the night. You can only play it in the daytime. You have to do it in the day, and sometimes you play it around death in order to soothe the spirit of the dead person, making sure that the spirits will go along and accept death without kicking up a fuss, so to speak. Now, you're all people who are quite good at transgressing, aren't you? Because it's quite difficult to preserve that strict side of things. I thought Ngufo might react to that, and neither did Serge. So I trapped you, basically. I played a move on you, didn't I? None of you realize what the problem is with playing at night. But there is a cultural aspect there. So we've only got 1 minute left, and I received a question from somebody Serge Mbarga knows very well, Roger Salomon Boko, who brought up the philosophical differences. He said philosophical and anthropological differences between AWALE and other seeding games. Now, this is not a trap. I'm just wondering if this raises any questions, this raises any ideas. Now, if I say anthropologically, for example, it's clear that for the Dogon people, the board represents the arc of the world. But with the Maasai, it's not the same thing at all. The board, if you look at it, it represents a man and a woman. So it's all about love, fertility, procreation, etc., etc. Now, are there seeding games, African seeding games that have rules that are really ethically different? For example, you're not supposed to starve the opponent. Are there games that have completely different philosophies that function completely differently?
version en Centrafrique, le Kisoro, lorsque je l'ai dit.
Now, the Kisoro, our version in the Central African Republic, when I discovered it, I did some in-depth research, and we discovered in the years 1800, there is an explorer who discovered the Nzakara. They are in Chad and Central African Republic. They used it. They used the game as a tool to lead the troops to battle. So you don't move this game when there is one seed. Sorry. You don't move the seed. You need to have at least 2 seeds. And then Zakara said that you can't actually take one single man ahead. Otherwise, he'll get killed. You need another person so that if the man gets killed, the other one will come back and warn the others. Now, it was a lot of work for us, but all the boards come with a spiritual dimension, with African ethnology. And I think this is an exciting work that we need to conduct because there's so many things we need to discover still. Are there some other comments? Yes, just wanted to add something, just 1 minute. In the version which is played in Cameroon, Songo, the board actually represents a battle between 2 villages. You have 7 pit on one side and 7 on the other side. And what Teddy said about the single seed, it's called the orphan seed in Songo. And in the extreme left pit, you can't actually move that seed because the a single seed cannot go in the opponent's side, camp. And in Songo, they say, well, you don't starve your opponent, contrary to AWALE. And if you have to play, you have the obligation to give the maximum of seeds. So there are subtleties, individual responsibility is used. Now, if you weaken and you place yourself in that position, well, you don't starve the opponent, but if there is a risk for the opponent, you will give some seeds to the opponent. So that is solidarity. So there are subtleties between AWALE and other games. Thank you. Ngufo? I'd like to also comment, Martial, on that, because we see a lot of similarities and differences between AWALE and other strategy games. People say, well, AWALE is African, chess is for the Western world, and the Go game is from Asia. But there is a humanistic dimension behind AWALE. I think it's a game of wisdom. It goes beyond strategy. There is a philosophical side, depending on the rules, depending on the regions. So it's not an innocent and naive game. Now, people are aware of the fact that this word requires that you defend yourself. So you have a military side, as Serge said. There is a difference, the defense side, but also humanistic side. And I don't think there is another strategy game which is exactly the same. Now, I won't answer the question of Roger Salmon Bapoko, but the examples that you gave shows the similarities. No matter what is the modality, you must not be alone. You have to be with the others. Either you're alone and you will be captured. So that's the general impression that comes out of the different rules, even when they are different. We don't have much time left for the panel, and I have invited, I don't know if she's there, Mrs. Aja Soro. We would like her to give us her point of view. She's a publisher. She has an animation studio based on the education of African history. She is on the cultural side of the African history. If she is there, maybe she can take the floor and tell us what inspiration it brings to her. Is it a game that can be part of a collection, since she is a publisher? Mrs. Adjasoro, is she there? She is not there. I cannot hear her. Martial, if you allow me, I think you have really touched on the major message, the invitation to be united, because you say, well, divided we fall. So it's a message of union, Pan-Africanism. And I hope that this game will bring together Africans, the diaspora, and to bring together all the populations. It's a humanistic message. So that was the conclusion by Ngufo. And maybe you can have 1 minute each for your concluding remarks. Eddie, Teddy first, and then Serge. Well, it's a dream for me that AWALE or different versions of AWALE are spread all over the world and recognized as it deserves, and having AWALE boards in all the schools education system. Thank you, Teddy. Serge, you are the veteran among all the others. Well, I think that African computing games are games which shed light on the notion of time, because it is often said that in Africa, people do not have the notion of time. With this strategic approach, with anticipation, you realize that managing time is really at the core of these games. And also, in African strategic games, time is your ally. And I hope that we will continue to put time on our side, and that we'll have a platform. And I'm saying that to the young people. We need a digital platform where the players can meet. When I was young, there was the team platform. So we need a platform where players all over the world can meet and play. I think that would be an interesting thing to do. Thank you very much. Well, my head is full of all the contributions I heard today. I'm sure that the director agrees with me. We've learned a lot from you, and I think that it augurs well for a fruitful future for AWALE and different games, the Kisoro, the Nsongo, the Ayo, and Solo, among others. And you will see your different contributions in the publication announced by Mrs. Diop. And we will continue taking this discussion further. Thank you very much. So we will move on to the next panel. Apparently, there is no interaction part, so we will move on to the second panel of the afternoon, the second and last panel of the afternoon, which will speak about AWALE on a point of view which is less related to games. It's AWALE and the issue of human development, as you know, well, because we are online, we had to adopt a certain format, and we did it. We have to use threats and turn them into opportunities. So we will listen one after the other. First, the intervention of a great player, researcher, a psychologist who organize games, platforms. It's Mr. Jean Rechitsky, whom you all know very well, and we will listen to him.
Bonjour, j'aimerais tout d'abord exprimer mes
Good morning.
remerciements.
I would like to start with thanking all the organizers of this symposium. It's really quite rare to be able to take the floor about the game of AWALE. I learned to understand the AWALE game about 50 years ago when I was doing some research in Côte d'Ivoire, a project which was leaving me enough time to learn the game, do some recordings, and carry out an analysis of the game. Only after a while was I able to work more seriously on the game, asking for credits for the project from the National Center of Scientific Research, which gave me a chance to do research, well, firstly in Côte d'Ivoire with children in the 1980s, the early 1980s.
2 ans plus tard,
And then a couple of years later, I was working more on the strategies of adults in AWALE. And by 1990, this led to the publication of a book on the strategies of AWALE players. It's basically a synthesis of the research that I had carried out in Côte d'Ivoire with a few additional jobs done with Swiss children by way of comparison. The main results of my research can be summarized as follows. With children, there is no decisive role of memory in the capacity to play well at AWALE. And this is true both of the children that we, for all the children that we interrogated, whether they were 9, 13, 14, and 15 years of age. The very youngest, 9 to 11, at least at 9, the children were not very good at tactics. Building crews effectively was not very, very easy for them. And the games could last forever because they weren't very good at anticipating and trapping the opponent to seize some seeds. So basically, it's not a children's game, which is what a lot of people think because the rules are quite simple and are taught very easily. But actually, you can't reserve the game for the youngsters. It becomes interesting only by 9 or 10, after 9 or 10, when children get better at anticipating. Concerning adults, we discovered that people have an extensive vocabulary to describe different situations and tactics that are specific to AWALE. This means that there is a wide culture that's associated with AWALE. We have seen the emergence of essential concepts that may not be part of the rules, but that are very important to play well. For example, that it's very important to have what you call in English, the move in hand. Basically, a number of moves that you can make without having to feed the opponent, which is a clear advantage. It's also been demonstrated that good adult players anticipate, calculate their moves, and that's an essential part of practicing AWALE. Now, that all goes to show that those players can have hypothetico-deductive thinking, which is what Piaget said, demonstrated that your intelligence had reached the stage of formal operations. Now, quite opposed to what Béard used to say, he claimed that the elder in the village were necessarily the best players because they had memorized all the good games. And so they could really just replay those games without having to think even. Now, I may be simplifying and distorting what Béard was saying, but actually it's been shown to be incorrect. The better urban players are, in fact, demonstrated that they were able to beat the best older players in the village, who, according to Béard, should have been the best. I'd like to point out that it's been difficult to be quite isolated in this field of research. Usually in congresses, not many people would come to hear me or to contradict me or discuss. In fact, the publications that exist on the game tend to simply describe it quite superficially at times. So it's a lonely field and there's a lot of space for other people. So if you have any projects, you're very welcome and I can only encourage you. After my own research, I dedicated most of my time after 2005 to organizing an international tournament at the Museum Swiss of the Tour de Paix. And 2 or 3 years after that the tournament was created, we followed up with an association, the International Association of AWALE Players, which is a bilingual association. You can also speak English. In English, it's called the International Association of Worry Players. And then a couple of years later, still, I retired from the University of Fribourg, which made it possible for me not just to organize the tournament at La Tour de Paix and at Fribourg, but also to attend other tournaments in foreign cities such as Cannes in France, but also in the Czech Republic, in Antigua. So I've seen some of the very best players at Worry. And we were invited by the Kazakhs, who have a game called Togos Kumalak, which is a similar game, though it's more complex because you play with 2 rows of 9 pits, which each contains 9 seeds at the beginning of the game. The capture rules are a little more complicated than in AWALE, but they're very interesting. And that also requires some very refined calculation of moves. Now, what did participating in these different tournaments teach me? Well, it taught me that the level of the players is not associated with their ability to memorize or some kind of internal library of moves and games. Actually, the only way to play well is to calculate the next moves at the time and anticipate which will be the best move before you play it. Another very important point. One could have had the idea originally, I might have believed in the early days, that by attending tournaments, that Africans must needs be the best players, people of some kind of African ancestry at least. But attending tournaments and seeing the Kazakhs improve dramatically and extremely quickly, I see that that is not necessarily the case, and that the best Kazakh players may in the future beat some of the very best players from Antigua, from Ghana, some expat players in France or the United Kingdom, people who play regularly. And one last thing I'd like to say. In my career as a teacher, I attempted to do some research, particularly on the experts themselves towards the very end of my career. And I found it very difficult to get any details out of them. In AWALE, experts are very discreet people, and they don't tell you their tricks or their recipes to win. It's also worth noting that attempts have been made at using computers to find the optimal strategy to win. There were 2 publications on the subject. The first one by Romain and Bal in 2002, a Dutch scientist, who claimed that AWALE had been solved. And then more recently, Blanc-Villain, Xavier Blanc-Villain, member of our association, also succeeded in listing all the possible situations in AWALE, and he has just created a website where he presents the results he has produced. Well, the game remains interesting nonetheless. Huge IT resources were necessary to cover all the possible situations. And actually, the results are a bit disappointing because they don't point at a good tactic or strategy. They don't give you advice to play well. But what's at stake here is that online tournaments, which are very numerous today, could be distorted if one of the participants is playing at home with the help of some big, powerful software. That's the risk. So by way of a conclusion, there's a wish I would like to express. It's close to my heart. You know, AWALE is one of the oldest board games in the world. It is recognized as an African cultural treasure. And yet, it is one of the very few board games that has no internationally recognized structure behind it. Now, that would be a wonderful thing. It would develop better. It would be used more in teaching if there were such an association. Look at Togus Tumalak, which is a good example. The governments of the Central Asian countries, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, have made resources available. They have demonstrated that it can be done, that competitions at the highest level can be organized internationally to bring together players from many different countries. And with the support of these governments, which I think was the decisive factor, this can be done. Now, it seems to me that the African countries where the game is played the most ought to understand that they have a mission. They should feel that they have a mission, the mission to create an organization that facilitates the organizing of international tournaments and competitions. They should support the clubs. Such an association could support the clubs and disseminate common rules through digital versions. It would be wonderful to strengthen the African presence in the game, and it would be good for the popularity of this game, which can have only positive effects on the pride of players. May this symposium contribute to such decisive progress. I thank you for your attention.
Merci beaucoup, professeur Rechivsky, qui devrait être parmi nous.
Thank you very much, Professor Rechivsky, who should be with us. Yes, I'm here. I'm here. This is a highly valuable contribution. And there were some also controversial comments that you made. And I would like to actually apologize. It's actually the technical glitches which prevented him to express himself. He was invited for the previous roundtable, and he is still here. The problem is now that after 30 seconds, we can't hear you anymore. That was the difficulty. I'm really sorry. We will read your contribution with great interest. That will be part of the proceedings of the symposium. Professor Mveondo apologized. He made one of the first presentations during the first panel, but he cannot be with us today. Now, for AWALE, we retain that there is a psychological, cognitive, developmental aspect which has to be noted, and that is really interesting to stimulate intellectual and mind capacities. You do some research, you yourself, organization of tournaments with a structure which will make it possible to make progress. And you said that the best players would be the players from Antigua, and they are Afro-descendants. I'm not sure Serge's grandfather or father would appreciate this comment. Let's move on to the next communication. We're not far from psychology. It's Professor Noma Bocage from Cergy, who is kind enough to be with us. She has done a lot of work on AWALE, and we will listen to her.
Bonjour, je suis.
Good afternoon. I'm Lynn Noma Bocage. I'm a university professor at Cergy Paris University and the deputy director of the Bonheur Laboratory. I'm pleased to be with you this afternoon, and I'd like to thank Suzanne Diop for having invited me to take part in this event around AWALE and African presence, history, culture, and knowledge. My intervention, entitled Learning to Count with the AWALE Game, is focused on the learning of first arithmetic structures with the AWALE game, which means counting.
En effet, nous considérons dans la
Indeed,
formation
we consider in the training of teachers that the use of the AWALE game makes it possible to adopt a psychodidactic approach, and I have taken two examples of research work that I conducted, and I'll present them this afternoon. AWALE game has great potential for learning at primary and junior high school levels, and also potential for the training of trainers. Our slogan, as it were, is you learn as you play. So I will present implementation and important results of two research work that I conducted around the AWALE game. The first one is about teaching and the construction of numbers and counting to pupils aged 6 to 7 with the AWALE game. It's a research work which was conducted between 2005 and 2010 in a teacher training institute. And it led, just as is the case for the second research work that I'll present, to a publication, and I can make the details of the publication available to you if you wish. And this research with first-year primary school pupils, we've actually approached the learning of the AWALE game rules by setting up groups of 3 pupils. The research was conducted in classrooms in the Picardy region and also in Martinique. So setting up groups allowed us to, in fact, reproduce the configuration of great AWALE players when they were in tournaments. They're face-to-face. But it also allowed us to add one element to observe, which made it possible for the pupils to learn the rules of the game better, to practice counting, and of course, to construct a number and to make, as you can see on the picture with the pointing system, the one-to-one correspondence with which enables them to match the sequence of words name 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 with the actual seeds in the AWALE game when they are counting, adding, subtracting, comparing. What is also interesting in this practice is that in this research, pupils learn to build their self-esteem by themselves. A pupil told us, I lost, but I won anyhow. Indeed, AWALE gives the possibility to win, be it 2 seeds during a game, even if at the end you lose some. And this satisfaction makes it possible to make progress at one's own pace in the learning process. The way we were organized enabled the teacher to observe the situation, and she changed her teaching mediation, the way she interacted with her pupils. Indeed, from the video recording, she realized that during feedback time, she was standing next to the blackboard with the tables arranged in a traditional manner, and that she was very far from her pupils. So she adapted the way she interacted with her pupils using the pattern of exchanges that they had during the game. Later on, she suggested an entirely different spatial arrangement of her classroom with a magnetic board for the feedback time, and that gave the opportunity to compare game strategies in order to choose the best one to win. So what we have learned from this first research, and that we would like to underline here, is that learning as you play provides the joy of learning that we knew already. But it makes it possible to practice patterns of enumeration, which are necessary for counting for pupils of that age. It allows the transformation of teaching practices, a change in the spatial arrangement of the classroom, and after observing children as they learn through the game. Hence, you can imagine a different way of teaching. The second example that I'd like to present was entirely conducted in Martinique at junior high school level, but it brought face-to-face students from an ordinary 4th-year class and 4th-year SECPA class. SECPA is the section of adapted general pre-vocational education, adapted to the cognitive difficulties of some 4th-year students aged 13 to 14. It also led to a publication that I can make available to you. But this mentorship between students led to another element of development and knowledge, because the project was part of what is called Practical Interdisciplinary Education, EPI. The teacher in charge of organizing these EPIs was the history teacher. So she took advantage of this game, of its history, because it was also played in Martinique. We found traces of this in the literature. She therefore asked the students to do some research work on the issue, and the students rediscovered information related to slavery, to slave trade, that they included in a digital book in the form of videos. They also put on a play, which they performed in front of their parents. They also went to present their work and the results of their research in local newspapers and on TV. But what I'd like to focus on with you this afternoon is the high value offered by this game opportunity and the learning of the rules in terms of the knowledge in maths acquired by the students. Indeed, the students designed their own AWALE board. They were helped by a local cabinet maker, and you can see on the picture the AWALE boards of the students. They used them during this project, this EPI, to build what we called transcultural knowledge. This transcultural knowledge was also supplemented by the fact that the students took others into account. They took into account students with specific needs. And one of the students said, speaking about the SECPA students, "Madam, they're very good because they succeeded in learning the rules, playing the game, and winning at the game, even against those who were supposed to teach them the game." And you can see the picture which illustrates this interaction with the students who were good in maths wearing blue t-shirts and the others in white t-shirts. In any case, inclusive education in junior high school was made possible. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much, Lynn. She is also with us. Thank you. Thank you for being here. So we'll have the interaction session after that. These are very interesting presentations. We are on research. We are more on mediation, psychodidactic. We can see the role of AWALE in education and teaching, and also AWALE for the diaspora and the Africans. When they move with their knowledge, technical knowledge, and transcultural knowledge also. So this is to be noted because not all objects encompass all these assets. So is it a game or not a game? Well, we're on both aspects. We will move on to another contribution by Mr. Nair Verdoy. He is a teacher, and he is in charge of the teaching aspect of Africa 2020, and we will have an interaction after his intervention.
Je vois Madame.
Well, I can see some speakers, but I can't see the video. And I'm not hearing from the technician that there's any problem with the video. So for now, we seem to be having a problem with launching the video with Nail Verdoy. I'm sure we can solve the problem in a few minutes, but in the meantime, I can give you rather sad piece of information. We've just been told on Facebook, this is a message from Ndeng Li Ndungu, And the gentleman tells us as follows. This is bad news for the IT people. This is not my younger brother or any of my friends. I'm just telling it to you how the way it got. He's getting back to my question of my trap about playing at night and other taboos. Now, he tells us that the game was always covered by superstitions and taboos. There are parts in the world, for example, where it can't be played at night. Keeping all this in mind, isn't it fair to ask yourself if dematerializing a game like that is a negative transgression of African culture? I'm just asking. I don't take sides. So I wonder if anybody would like to answer that. It looks like I still can't see or send Nail Van Doye. Ah, here we are.
Bonjour, Nail Van Doye.
Good afternoon. My name is Nail Van Doye. I would like to thank the publishing house Présence Africaine for organizing this symposium about AWALE. For myself, AWALE is a subject as an underestimated teaching tool. I'd like to start with mentioning the Africa 2020 season. When the mission was handed over to the commissioner whom we've met, she decided immediately that there should be an educational side to this. And we know that that has played a very important role. Transmitting things to the future generations is one of the goals of this season. And there was also a wish to organize the season in partnership with the National Ministry of Education, Youth and Sports. And the collaboration with the ministry was duly successful. The ministry got involved with the spirit of the season. Now, concerning the use of AWALE, there are four main goals. One is that it's important to remember that it's a game. We shouldn't be forgetting that a game was made for fun and for facilitating logical mathematical reflections like checkers or Chinese checkers, for example, and retaining some aspect of competition within the general feel of game, fun, leisure things. Second goal is that it's important to put that into context. It enables us to understand that Africa has always had its own tool. Unlike what some people may think or say, it didn't have to wait for other continents to bring tools. We know, for example, thanks to the Ishango bone, that it was found already a while ago that this bone, which has lines on it, is, according to scientists, at the very least, a counting stick, which means that there was some math going on in Africa as far back as well. Some people say 6,000 years, some people say 20,000. It certainly is many thousand years back that people are already counting things in Africa. And in Africa, I've seen people adults playing all day long in Ethiopia, Chad, Mali, Congo, Senegal. AWALE is something that you see played in a lot of different places. The third goal area about AWALE is that the game can illustrate certain teachings, such as science, but also human sciences and experimental sciences. That's really the spirit of what we were trying to do with the African season. You can use African examples to illustrate things. It's not about changing the curriculum. It's just about illustrating the curriculum with specifically African case studies. Take sports, for example. In PE, there's a theme, which is opposition games, battle games. So we asked the teacher to prepare some work on the Senegalese wrestling, which means that you're working on your opposition sports, but at the same time, you're discovering a culture. You're discovering a game, which happens to be the national sport of Senegal. And in geography, we produced a subject around Moroccan tourism, intra-African tourism, meaning, for example, Senegalese newlyweds who come to Morocco for their honeymoon, for example. So you can also, and this is the fourth goal, use AWALE as a tool to learn math. And that's probably the thing that is most relevant to me. You can use it particularly even with educational ITCs, using tools like phones and tablets, because this is a game, because there is an exchange with at least one other person. This is something that can be used very easily, even in elementary school, starting with numbering and combinations. Now, why is AWALE a strategic game that is very interesting as a learning tool? Well, because on the one hand, it's very simple, very easy to learn the rules. And right from preschool, in order to have strategies, you have to count, you have to calculate, you will be numbering small collections, like here, for example, seeds, memorize these collections, and also split them apart. I'm grabbing this pit, I've got 5, I have to hand them around. I know that the more I put here, the fewer I will have. If I pick up the pit where there's 4, I can only go this far. This is an intellectual mechanism and an intellectual process. It's also important to remember that in this game, there is no chance. For all these useful skills, with Madame Diop, the head of Présence Africaine, we were considering organizing a competition, an AWALE competition in the Paris Academy with 7-year-olds. It turned out to be impossible because of the health crisis, but we thought that at that particular level of 2nd grade, it would be very interesting. Just like, chess competitions or checkers. And even in high school, you can still use AWALE. In fact, we have another project with Présence Africaine, run by Présence Africaine, with a high school in the city of Toulouse. Now, they're building a gigantic AWALE game. On the idea of the publishing house, this is something that they're doing as part of their studies. This is a professional high school that works on construction and cabinet making, and they're working on this 2-meter long object, which you can visit on the site of the Urban Vitry site in Toulouse, but which will also be visited, available to be seen and shown by Présence Africaine in the city of Toulouse. Another interesting thing that was suggested by Madame Rieu, the teacher we saw yesterday, has to do with probabilities. She organized a session around probabilities, showing that you can develop a strategy to win at AWALE with a probability tree. In fact, we met Madame Rieu when we invited her to Blois because we found it really interesting to work on probabilities, but at the same time, deconstruct these stereotypes about a whole continent that just never thought of anything for itself and always expected others to bring it knowledge. Well, actually, they were working with math, and they have, in fact, brought a very interesting contribution to knowledge on this planet. It may also be interesting for the future to know that AWALE is something that you can work with at a much higher level, in fact, a level that is way beyond me, with the Markov ladder, the martingale, things that have to do with very, very high level math indeed. There you are. Thank you for hearing me out, and good luck with the rest of the symposium. Thank you very much, Nail. I'm sure he is somewhere around. Now, we have our three main speakers with us for the panel. Now, the goal is to look at the human development of AWALE. AWALE as a tool for learning has shown that AWALE can be a very interesting resource in teaching, in education, also to transform the perception of Africa, to integrate Africa in ordinary teaching curricula in France and in the world. AWALE can serve as a resource. And that is something that is very, very broad. It could be used a lot more than it is, and much more than the starting points that we often have contented ourselves with. Now, Madame Numaboka was suggesting more than that. I'm going to give the floor to Liliane Braga, who is a Brazilian historian and who has very recently published a book about AWALE, and the use of AWALE in Brazil is a very interesting, in fact, fascinating experience. Madame Braga will be with us, and I'm sure she'll be commenting on her video. Thank you.
Greetings from São Paulo. I am Liliane Braga Ndemboimi, a diasporic scholar in the field of cultural studies with a doctorate in history. The purpose of my presence here is to introduce you to the book Mancala AWALE of Municipal Education Secretariat of São Paulo, which was launched in December of 2020, and it's available online for free download. Mancala AWALE was implemented by the Secretariat in 2015 as part of its board games program, and I have been working with it since then. In 2016, the first Mancala AWALE Festival was held in São Paulo, governed by the international rules for competitions organized by the Warrior Academy of Antigua and Barbuda in the Caribbean. My work with AWALE has started while I was in the team of the Racial Ethnic Center of the Municipal Education Secretariat of the City of São Paulo. Later, already hired as a technical advisor for AWALE with the board games program of São Paulo municipality, I had the honor to train teachers of the municipal education system on cultural, historical, and epistemological aspects of AWALE. This book is a collective work, and teachers who are implementing the program in the municipal schools have a great role on it, especially African descendant ones. Now I will show you some parts of the book. In these pages, you see teachers and their students doing school activities with Mancala AWALE. Observing these pictures, it is possible to have an idea of the work which has been done throughout the last 5 years. I would like to say that Mancala AWALE is contributing to the self-esteem of Afro-descendant students of all ages and allowing non-Black students to learn about Africa and its knowledge system. We hope this book will conduct the increase of AWALE in the education system of the whole country, so as to positively affect new generations to come. Last but not least, I would like to thank all those who have worked and who works for AWALE to be part of São Paulo educational system. And also, I would like to thank Monsieur Marcial Zebelingar for the invitation to be here today, and my colleagues, Vanicléa Silva Santos and Luana Antunes as well. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Liliane. C'est vrai que
Thank you very much, Liliane. It is quite striking as an African to see that an object of African culture, which does not get much attention in some areas in Africa, can be rediscovered outside Africa. And that teaches us as Africans a lesson. So there is really a lesson to draw from all this. Is Liliane Braga here? She was supposed to be here today with us, if possible.
Yes, I'm here. Hello, greetings from São Paulo. So I'm not sure if I could hear to your question very well. So you had a question following the video screening and the AWALE in São Paulo municipality, Department of Municipality Education.
Oui, en fait, oui. Oui, en fait, c'est vraiment des aspects.
Yes, just quickly, I just wanted to touch on the ethnological, historic part. I think you call AWALE Ayo. Where was it played? Was it in the Quilombos? Were you able to find out about the history of AWALE in Brazil? Just in a few words, the Afro-Brazilian history of AWALE. Just in a few words, could you tell us about that?
Oh, okay. So we have important Black scholars in Brazil who are specialists in it. Dr. Eliane Costa Santos from Unilab, who is a Luana colleague, and Professor Acácio Almeida from Federal ABC University. They could talk about it better than myself. But what I should ask is that, what I should add is that we use the name Mancala AWALE for the program in São Paulo, and we recovered the history of AWALE in Brazil with a contribution from Dr. Eliane Costa Santos in the book. So there's a chapter, her chapter in the book on it, but it's not deep or research on that you can find there, but there are also other scholars that are important reference, as Professor Henrique Cunha, and they could add more on that part than myself. I am a historian, but I address epistemic racism mainly, and my part or my contribution in the program is to address the contributions of AWALE to recover our philosophies, cosmovisions that can, or actually that are important tools to defeat racism and epistemic racism.
Merci beaucoup. En tout cas, on retient que c'est un ouvrage qui contribue.
Thank you very much. Well, that certainly it's important to mention that the book is a way to fight against racism as well. It shows that cultural practice can be used to resist, to work for humanism, as Ngufo was in fact saying. Thank you very much for joining in. We will carry on the discussion a little later. I wonder if Professor Kunde is with us. We wanted to hear him. We were supposed to see him yesterday, but due to the time difference, he was not able to join in yesterday, and in fact, he's not here today either. Professor Kunde, are you here? He is not. Well, before we get into the discussion, let me tell you, this is likely to be a little complicated. We've got questions that have to do with AWALE as such, the game, but there are also a lot of questions that don't have anything to do with the game, the playing aspect of it. So we should probably organize this questions and answers session around two themes. Let's start with the simple playing aspects. I can see that I see that Professor Richitsky is available, but I'm going to take you second, Professor, because I think that the person I'm going to bring out is probably going to be discussing with you. Now, do I have Will Biakop here? Are you online? Yes, I'm here. Hello. See, I would like to say a few words about Will Biakop. He is the representative, the African representative for NBA. Now, I thought it was really interesting to get your point of view, simply because, well, we're talking about organizing championships, right? This is all about organizing a worldwide or at least continental championship. And now here's somebody who does that in a different area, but in Africa. So he understands the principles of an international league and what that means for organizing tournaments. Now, what can you say as a promoter of basketball? This is what you do, right? Thank you very much, Martial. Thank you for inviting me. Congratulations with getting this off the ground. The speakers were really at the very highest quality. That's wonderful. Well, AWALE is something I'm just discovering, right? I'm not an expert like your speakers. So I learned a lot in the last 2 days. I think that AWALE is really just another proof of the fantastic cultural capital that we have in Africa, right? People are always talking about intangible assets, right, in English. Well, doesn't this just demonstrate once more that we have a lot to give? And from a cultural aspect, it's very powerful. I think that it's true that educationally, as well as playfully, it works both ways. So it's really a great tool for this learning by playing trend, which is very popular these days. Now, you probably know that I believe that the economy of sports, particularly in Africa, is part of the solution to face the huge challenge of this continent. We're talking about a demographic challenge here, but also an environmental challenge and, of course, an economic challenge. So the sports industry has a very important role to play, has solutions to offer. And I believe that AWALE is a sport. You know, it's called a mind game in English. It's an intellectual sport. It stimulates the mind. So I do think that with 13 million young people joining the labor market in Africa every day, we need to develop an AWALE industry. You know that the sports industry in the world is about 3% of worldwide GDP. That's $1,200 billion. And Africa is a great supplier of talents. Only remember Didier Roubas, Samuel Eto'o, etc. These are people who provide the raw talent. But this wealth that we create and send out through the world, 90% of that wealth remains in Western countries. Now, surely, if we figure out how to organize AWALE intelligently and pay proper tribute to this game, we should be able to develop our own industry around that at the school level already, and develop it further to elite players, organizing major competitions, generating income on several strings of selling tickets on the one hand, but sponsorship, broadcasting rights, etc., etc. And that should facilitate the emergence of a real industry, which of course would be a great outlet for our youth. That's about what I wanted to say. Thank you, Will. Thank you very much. Now that was really a message to all those great players out there and all those great organizers of tournaments at international levels. It's a sort of nudge, right? Have you looked at what's going on in major league sports? Is this a universe that inspires you? I see that Professor Raczynski has already raised his hand. Let's start with questions that have to do with the game as such, and then we will take questions that go a little bit wider off the mark of the game. Professor Raczynski, you have the floor. Do you hear me? Do you hear me? You do. Good. Now, when I raised my hand, what I had in mind at first was to reply to the Brazilian. I wanted to reply to the Brazilian speaker because I recall meeting somebody at Ouro Preto in Brazil, meeting somebody where we were showing some of our data, and I met a student who was doing a psychology PhD. I was in that same year organizing, it was 2006, I think, I was organizing a symposium about AWALE in Fribourg with people from Cuba, Antigua, and of course, some people coming from the UK and from France. And we invited this Brazilian young person whose name is Cristiana Fusa Carneiro. She was invited to attend the symposium, and while there, she met people from Antigua, and she remained in touch with them. And I believe that through this very person, the city of Sao Paulo was informed that the game existed and that it held some potential. Now, it would be nice to get that confirmed through history, but wouldn't that be an interesting example to show that this game, which no doubt was played in Brazil by people from Africa, had to be reintroduced in the end through the work of academics and the world of universities, which means basically that what we're doing can serve a higher purpose, and that the game can regain its life force because it's been forgotten in some areas of the world where it used to exist. So that was the first suggestion I wanted to make. The second thing, I had to look at my own video. It's always painful to see yourself saying what you thought you'd said when there's things I forgot to say. It seems to me that dematerializing is not a great thing, because what I really loved about this game, what really attracted me to it and kept me attracted to it, is what's going on between two people around this game, because it's never just two people and a board. There's the two people playing, of course, but there's the audience. There's all these people around them commenting, and there's the prestige. It's important what's going on between two people, of course, recognizing the best of the two, admiring, and it's going to be important to the winner, of course. This is not just about fun. It's not just playing. It means something to be recognized. So I wanted to say that, and I don't think I got it said. Now, to answer what you said about the economic aspect, I'm going to let you finish. Go ahead. I was almost done. I didn't have that much to say about economics. I do want to stress that I believe in the atmosphere that is created around AWALE, which you can find again in international tournaments, provided that you respect certain traditions. In the tournaments I organize in Switzerland, for example, we make sure that people play at least 3, preferably 5, best of 3, best of 5 games. That's the way it was played in the village. To consider that you've beaten somebody, you have to have beaten them at least 2 times out of 3, or 3 out of 5. Currently, in Kazakhstan, in tournaments, at least online, you only play once. Well, based on what I experienced in Côte d'Ivoire, that was not enough. You couldn't just say, he's better than me after playing against him just once. And I think that some of these traditions deserve to be kept. Thank you very much. That is a great challenge, because the game moves, it dematerializes, but there are certain things perhaps that you can't do without, or that are very difficult to preserve. I saw that Guy raised his hand. He wanted to comment or tell a story, I think. Well, he's got 2 minutes. But remember, we're just talking about the game itself right now. This will probably be the last intervention about the game if nobody else wants the floor on that subject. I'm here, MC. And since I did not take the time yesterday, and I'm not very far from the red carpet here in Cannes, so I do want to thank a lot of people. There are so many people who deserve being thanked around this game. I want to thank you for bringing the game. Thank you to Seta Glenda for making me discover this game. I want to thank Xavier. It's fantastic to discover Xavier's technique, and with the help of Setoufa, I was able to initiate, say, about 9,000 people in the past years. I want to thank Professor Nouma Bocage for her speech. It really is heartwarming to hear another speech, a speech at the very, very highest level. To me, as a parent, as an initiator, this is mind-boggling. Now, what I want to say about the game. Before you can win, you have to play. To play, all you have to do is recognize this, that, and this. With that, you can play. You can't win necessarily, but you can play. If you know the difference between 1, 2, and 3, you can get started. And as the professor was saying, of course you may lose, but you won't lose and lose everything. You will have gained something as well. I initiated some people in the mammoth, as we called in France, in the National Education Ministry. The teachers were really amazed at the speed with which kids start to concentrate in the room, in a classroom, as soon as the boards are placed on the tables in front of them. And that's something I wanted to share with you. And another story, I did a tournament at primary school level, 6-year-olds to 9-year-olds, roughly. With the 10-year-olds, 9 to 10, the 2 best of each class were playing against each other. And the winner turned out to be a kid who everybody hated. The parents, the teachers, and the kids. Nobody could deal with that child, but he won. So it's worth mentioning. And the last story I wanted to share with you. Next to the red carpet that everybody knows, there's a festival of African gaming. And I'm sure most people here know it. Once I was able to go bringing my boards, and I was welcomed. Yes, by all means, bring your boards, show us. I thought I was going to get taught. even though I had some experience with AWALE. Well, actually, no. Those young people turned up and they looked at the game and said, what on earth is that? There were people with as little hair as me, and they thought it was really funny that this game was coming up again and that you had a chance to teach your kids about that. This is all about human development. This is all about transmission, isn't it? The kids didn't know it, and it's worth knowing, worth discussing. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to discuss.
Thank you very much. I think there is no interaction. I'm sorry, I raised my hand. Well, and also there was a question about me, so I'll maybe give a quick answer. Thank you, Martial. And I'd like to also thank Guy about the remark, the comment that he made. What I would like to say is that, well, there is in fact, even when you're thinking about digitalizing artificial intelligence, and also Teddy mentioned it, it's the human factor, which is incontrovertible, and it's part of AWALE game. I discovered AWALE game in the year 2000 in Picardy. It was within the framework of a training of trainers, because there was an exchange between colleagues. So there was a cultural exchange for the training of trainers. That's the first thing. Secondly, there's the will to understand the game. There were teachers, math teachers, and we started the first research work that I mentioned. But because, well, it was my will to extend this research to Martinique. I discovered with Professor Richitsky that in Antigua, you have the AWALE Academy, and Martinique, well, is 2 islands from Antigua. And when I said Martinique, it's Martinique and Guadeloupe. And I couldn't understand why there was no AWALE game in Martinique. And we found some historic research that I discovered at the Tour de Paix with my colleagues. We found a document from a slave trader, probably, I don't know exactly, but at the end of the 18th century, in his writing, he says that the slaves were playing a game, and the description that he gave is really much the AWALE game. And he speaks about Martinique and St. Lucia, which is 30 kilometers away from Martinique. And I said, well, there was AWALE in Martinique. So I started looking. We didn't find traces, but with the research work that I did with the high school students, they went and they asked questions to their grandparents. And in 2016, well, there is an anthropological part, because some students, they were descendants of slaves, and they weren't aware of it. It's during the game that they were able to find this identity and ask questions to their great-parents, and they found a 93-year-old lady in a village who was able to tell us about the AWALE game. Now it has been reintroduced in high school level, in cultural centers, etc. And to end, AWALE game makes it possible to understand cognitive reasoning, how you learn. And I use it in the training of trainers so that they can understand how pupils, students learn. So I'm really pleased because, well, I am still teaching online around AWALE game. Thank you very much. So let's remain in the diaspora with Luana Antunes. in Brazil. And then we will also hear Ngufo, who has things to say. We have another person, Luana. Thank you for being here. Please try to be short because we are running out of time. Well, I'm keeping silent because I was learning a lot. Well, my parents were not familiar with it, as I said yesterday. Now, I'd like to go back to what Mr. Ritsiski said about the teaching of AWALE in Brazil. São Paulo is a megapolis, and they have more structures in institutionalizing the teaching of AWALE and other African cultural instruments. Yesterday, I didn't have time to say that, but there is a re-education project in Brazil, which is built through Black populations. At the beginning of the 60s, you had the unified Black movement. And from then on, there was a sort of, yes, it's a kind of a meeting, a gathering of poets, scientists, professors, artists. It's an association, yes, an association. And from then on, we were able to get the promulgation of the law that I mentioned yesterday. And we've noticed that there was a change in the education field in Brazil, but university programs in Brazil are programs which are turned to Europe. When you speak about mathematics, they don't say anything about Brazil. They don't need Africa. In the teaching of trainers is impacted by the European program. So I think this is the problem. And we have another group of Black professors who have picked up Black tradition, and they're now trying to open the mind of the population. So there are two camps face-to-face in Brazil. Thank you very much for this testimony. Now, before moving on to Ngufo, well, the hypothesis that the game was just introduced in Brazil, it's not actually always true, because you find it with the Neg Marron in Sumatra, and it's Ajitpur with the same cultural nuances and so on. So it's the same region, the same movement. These populations kept AWALE or Adipo. So we have to read the book that Liliane Braga presented. Ngufo, I just wanted to pick up on the trap question, the risk of going virtual. Since you're on Facebook and you like that, there is a second question you can answer both at the same time for all your colleagues. So there's another question which says, well, the challenge is not to leave it in the hands of ferocious companies which will take over African culture for their own profit. So maybe you can answer both questions. So I represent the AWALE community then. Okay, the first question about digitalization and the fact that tradition might be lost. This is an age-old debate. Well, it is good to know one's tradition, but it's even better to know what is the spirit that lies behind, because some people take it as a dogma and they don't understand what was the will behind a specific law. It was developed by our ancestors at a given time. How can we now transpose it today in the 21st century? What you said, when you don't play AWALE, it's because there was a risk and so on. And sometimes not playing at night was, and sometimes playing with at night is to create connections with them. Now, I can't see how digitalization will betray this spirit, but in some areas, you continue to pay tribute to the ancestors. And you know that we're in the global village and we are taking the game to another level. And there is no contradiction when we understand the spirit of our African traditions. Now, the second question, Mrs. Old Beleke, the ferocious companies. I think that no ferocious company prevented an African company from making use of AWALE. The Africans have the possibility to take up this game and to promote it and to benefit from all the economic profit provided by this game. If they don't do it, others will do it, and others have started doing it well. So hurry up.
Merci. On est vraiment sur la fin du temps d'interaction que malheureusement, j'ai laissé un peu.
So we're reaching the end of this interaction. We wanted to discuss more. There is a hand raised by Mrs. Usaina. I can't see your name completely. We have to be brief at the end. Sorry. Thank you to Mr. Martial Bellinga for giving me the floor. Good afternoon, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I am Usaina Titipina, Second Secretary at the Permanent Delegation of Togo with UNESCO. We would like to congratulate the speakers and panelists for the quality of their contribution in this symposium with a cultural, social, scientific, mathematical dimension, pluridisciplinary dimension. I listen to the different contributions with great interest, and through their different presentations, we were able to travel to Africa and elsewhere to be connected with the AWALE game called Wari in my community. This game impacted us because it is entertaining and it made it possible to bring together different generations. So I'd like to take advantage of this opportunity to support the proposal made by Professor Mve Ondo, proposal which was also repeated today, that is to introduce this game in school curricula so that children can approach mathematics in an entertaining manner and as early as possible. I'd like to thank all the organizers of this symposium. It's an excellent initiative which makes it possible to be better aware and to also enhance our cultural values. For lack of time, I'll stop here. Thank you, Mrs. Usaina Titipina. I'll stop the discussions and interactions here with a feeling that I've tried to give the floor to a maximum number of people that, I have frustrated as few people as possible. Those who are interested in our should make proposals and suggest future events around AWALE. We will be able then to continue our discussions that we will summarize with the director of Présence Africaine, organizer of this symposium, which is historical and which is the first of its kind, as many said. Mrs. Diop will pronounce the concluding words, and I'd like also to speak to give the floor to Mrs. Noma Bocage. She will summarize briefly, and then Mrs. Diop will take the floor with the UNESCO partner, who is more than a partner, to say what we can take away from these 2 afternoons of discussions, debates around AWALE. Is Mrs. Noma Bocage with us? Is she available? Yes, I'm available.
You manage a research laboratory, which is called Bonheur, happiness. Yes, indeed. So we must trust you to tell us what's worth remembering scientifically from the discussions of this day and of yesterday. Well, thank you very much for giving me the floor for this quick summary of all the aspects that we will find useful, and that aspects that to me are good ideas for future developments and research in surrounding AWALE. What we have heard in these discussions, there was a long and good anthropological historical discussion that was very useful in setting the context for this game which is much more than a game. That's really what we can conclude, whilst remaining, of course, a game in that it has huge potential for fun and play. Now, as the manager of the Laboratoire Bonheur, I want to say that we want to be very serious about pleasure as part of human development, pleasure as a part of welfare. What is being happy and having pleasure all about? Developing that in teaching, in practices, and in human relations is something that interests us greatly. And I think that this symposium has demonstrated that the game of AWALE is, in fact, an object, not just an artifact, but an object that covers all of these facets. Mathematical potential has been identified, a lot that has to do with history and anthropology and human relations, including transcultural knowledge. In today's world, this old item, every time you ask yourself, does such an old item still have a role to play? Indeed, it does. Indeed, it raises new ideas. Indeed, it can be adapted to this day's technologies. So it's a wonderful new field in which AWALE absolutely has a role to play. And I can only agree with Mr. Rachitsky that when it comes to intelligence, there's a lot that remains to be done. So my wish is very much that we will get some funding to deepen research around the potential of the game of AWALE. Thank you, Lina. That's very high level indeed and very interesting. But I have to give the floor to Madame Diop and to the representative of UNESCO who is with us. I want to thank you again because you prepared your presentations. I worked with your presentations. I look at your profile and I was every time impressed with the people, even though I knew what you were worth. When I hear a person saying, I realized I was African and I had to gravitate towards AWALE, those are strong words. And I realized that an African can learn a lot from Afro descendants and from African culture. These are surprises for us. People, Africans from the continent, we feel always surprised that our culture how far it's traveled with our ancestors who have traveled the world. We can learn a lot from each other still. Thank you all for joining us from such places of knowledge, from places of communication, from places of sharing. Thank you again. Thank you to Présence Africaine for organizing this pioneering event. Madam Director, may I give you the floor? Thank you very much, Martial. And thank you too. You certainly have handled these discussions masterfully. We did not have much time, but things went very well thanks to you. I thank you again most warmly. I think this is a good start. I don't want to wait to keep it much longer. The interpreters have left. Well, they have not, as a matter of fact. The interpreters are still with you. We want to inform you that we have a final declaration to make. There's a statement, and we want to, on top of this public statement, inform you that the papers of this symposium will be published. I want, in my turn, to thank everybody who was here. I want to give the floor to Mr. Ibrahim Abdullahi. Thank you very much. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, Madam Director, Madam Diop. It is my privilege today to represent UNESCO's Assistant Director General for Priority Africa and External Relations here at UNESCO. He would have liked to join us. He would have liked to have stayed with us until the end of the symposium. Unfortunately, he had prior engagement, and I shall be speaking on his behalf. First, I would like to thank very warmly Madame Suzanne Diop and Présence Africaine, as well as the whole team of Présence Africaine. They took the initiative for this event, which was co-organized with UNESCO. I would like to particularly thank all the panelists and the representative of the African intelligentsia. We've learned a lot today, and I'm sure we have a lot more to learn in time to come. Thank you very much for that. And I would like to thank the scientific committee, represented and chaired by Martial Zebelinga, who, as you so well put it, Madam Director, masterfully steered these sessions for 2 days. We were very impressed indeed with the quality of discussions, but also with the deftness of coordination of all these discussions and interventions. And I would like to thank the technical teams of UNESCO and, of course, the technicians of Présence Africaine. Thank you for all the preparatory work. I know that you put a lot of work into this. This was the first time we worked together. I think that it was a very successful piece of work. And I want to thank the members of our own team, the contextual analysis and perspective team. They worked with Présence Africaine, they worked with the technical services of UNESCO. I want to thank the interpreters, the technicians. I want to thank you all for your patience and cooperation. As you know, UNESCO's world priorities include Africa and gender equality. These are our priorities, and UNESCO has developed an operational strategy for Priority Africa, which is harmonized, of course, with the vision that the African Union expresses in Agenda 2063. This is all about building an integrated, prosperous and peaceful Africa, and an Africa that is a dynamic power on the international stage. UNESCO's operational strategy consists in 6 flagship programs. One of these programs aims at strengthening the educational systems for sustainable development in Africa, and another program focuses on harnessing the power of culture for sustainable development and peace in the context of regional integration. Thanks to its highly diverse assets, AWALE is an extremely relevant game for UNESCO because it touches upon all the focal areas of UNESCO: science, culture, human science, as well as exact science, culture and education. And of course, there's an intergenerational aspect as well, and a gender aspect, because young women and older women play this game as much as young men, and they can play together and recreate very interesting interactions. So with these diverse assets, we find in AWALE something that strengthens our belief that you were a great partner for us. We were very impressed with all of these presentations. We've learned a tremendous lot about the game and about the origins of the game. When it comes to natural and exact sciences, AWALE is a mathematically very rich and very complex tool, and it stimulates reflection, anticipation. I believe in anticipation. That's something we work on a lot when prospective capacity in Africa is very important to many of our projects. And then there's the subject of education, in which AWALE has pedagogical uses. It's a tool that can be used to stimulate the intellectual development both of children and adults. It creates also, it can be used for intergenerational communication. And in human and social sciences, AWALE transmits values for peaceful and inclusive living. It facilitates the building of connections between age groups and cultural groups. It develops intercultural dialogue. And finally, I really loved what the moderator said about the very specific aspects of African cultural heritage. It's essential. AWALE is a perfect symbol of cultural and historical unity. This is no doubt an item of great value for African and Pan-African heritage. It's part of something we have in common, something that must be protected and handed down to build a common vision, working together with the diaspora to let Africa finally shine. As a conclusion, I would like to quote these words. I have but little time. I want to quote these words by the moderator, Marshall Zeer-Belinga. He said at one point that AWALE is a game that truly has a place in the world, particularly, of course, in Africa and in the African diaspora. And I completely agree with what he said. AWALE indeed has a very important role to play in the world. On behalf of the Assistant Director General for Africa Priority and External Relations, I want to thank all participants for joining us in the last 2 days. I want to thank all the African partners in all the institutions that have participated in the last 2 days. Thank you all. I really hope that this is going to stimulate and create synergies in the future. We should be able to promote this art, this game. It needs and deserves it. Thank you very much. Thank you. And thank you. Goodbye.
Au revoir tout le monde. Bye-bye.
Goodbye, everybody.
Hello,
All the best.
Bye.
I hope we meet soon. Bye-bye.
I hope so. I hope so. Take care. Take good care.
Thank you.
Let's continue the discussion on the forum.
Yes.
Yeah.
ora.co.uk.
Okay.
www.ora.co.uk.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Sorry, Xavier.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, it was a pity. It was a pity.
Yeah, it's for next time.
I'm really sorry.
Yeah, but now that it works. See you. Bye-bye.